This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, March 31st, 2023. And I have the excellent Ara Wagon here with me from Android Police. Hi, Ara. How are you?
I'm very much frazzled and a little bit tired because this is the last day I'm working before I take an actual week off and detoxify and try to keep myself from burning out, because it's just been it's been like a nonstop year since I started.
It's been a year already.
Yeah.
I know. Just the last 3 months, it feels like it's been a year to me. Tech has just not stopped just dropping crap on our heads.
The last 12 months have been a very, very long journey, and I'm very, very happy because for March, April, and at least the beginning little sliver of May, I have what can actually be called downtime. There's no product launches, there are no huge sales events that are going to eat up all of my time like Prime Day this summer. It's just going to be nice. And I get to go watch fireworks every night because I live at Walt Disney World.
Fantastic. Well, let's hope it stays that way, because I'm fully expecting something to come and just put everything in shambles. But you won't have to deal with that if you're taking a break. So let's see. So we got a bunch of news this week. A lot of it is not super exciting because it's not, groundbreaking news, but there are some new phones in here that are pretty significant for markets outside the US anyway. Global markets, so not just China, because generally I don't focus on China-only phones. And then, the rumor mill, the news mill, the, leaks. So I want to start with a Redmi Note 12 series. Finally announced. I got two of them here. I need to do an unboxing video for you folks, but I got the Note 12 Pro and the Note 12 Pro Plus, which are kind of both the meat of the series. There's also a Note 12, of course. There's a Note 12 Turbo for China, which is what I just was saying about a phone that we'll probably never see. But for those of you who are looking for a really great phone, like a Swiss Army knife type phone, think Galaxy S23 Ultra, but at a third of the price, like $450 or so, this is it. This is one of the phones that every year I'm just man, I cannot believe how much stuff Xiaomi can pack in a phone, keep it affordable, and make it a really great experience. So yeah, Note 12 series is out. And what are your thoughts on that initially?
I mean, they're pretty enough phones and the prices are competitive. I mean, at this point, when I hear S23 Ultra and when I hear Note, I'm like, okay, where's my stylus?
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, these phones look pretty decent. The color is really spectacular, although there are going to be better colors that we'll get to in a bit on some of these other ones. The 200 megapixel camera, the samples look good, but they are camera samples taken by a journalist, so I have to take them with two big pinches of salt.
Well, not just any journalist, because the story I posted that I'll put in the show notes is by Andy Boxall at Digital Trends, and Andy and I are good friends. He's like me. He's a mobile photographer. He is. You can give him almost any phone, he'll take a good photo. So, but what stands out for me here, Ara, is this is a 200 megapixel ISOCELL HPX sensor with OIS on a $450 phone. This is not just some, 200 megapixels so we can print it on the back of the phone, kind of sensor. This is a good sensor. This is one of, Samsung top 3 or so sensors. And they put it in a $450 phone. And they didn't, do what they always do at this price point, which remove OIS. No, they kept it. Now, of course, the ultra wide and the macro are stupid, 8 megapixel generic, 2 megapixel generic. But you look at that sensor and you're like, okay, so you didn't give us the best one, but you gave us a pretty good one. So this one has basically 0.6 microns, and it lets you do binning in two ways. You can do binning 4:1 to get to 50 megapixels, and then you can do binning 16:1 to get to 12.5 megapixel, and that's exactly the same as S23 Ultra does, right? Because there are some 200 megapixel sensors that do not support that middle 50 megapixel binning, but this one also does not support native 2x zoom, which some sensors do. So, like for example, on the Galaxy S23 Ultra, if you punch in 2x, it's taking a crop of the sensor, but it's pixel binning that 50 megapixel center into 12.5. And that's actually supported by the hardware in the sensor and in the Snapdragon chip. So you end up with what they call lossless zoom, because really you're not like taking a 200 megapixel photo and doing some kind of weird zoom on it. You actually are taking real pixels. You're losing the ability to bin them 16:1, you're binning them 4:1. So low light could be a little iffier because there's very small pixels. But this is really exciting that, other than that feature, this sensor has everything else. And for $450. So that's kind of why I think Andy got excited in his story, because he's like, okay, like this is the real deal. Like in the past, the Note series from Redmi has always omitted things like OIS. They've been like, well, that's where we can save money. But not this time. We're getting the whole enchilada. So that's got me excited too.
Well, I mean, for a 200 megapixel sensor, I can't understand having any camera sensor that's above 100 megapixel that doesn't have OIS. Because if once you start pixel binning in, any amount of shake is gonna look terrible. Like, the OIS is more important than having the big sensor to begin with.
I agree 100%. And that's why I'm always bummed when I see them put these decent, good quality sensors in these $200 to $400 phones and then not put OIS in them. I'm like, I'd rather you take last year's sensor or 2 years ago's like 48 or whatever and give us OIS and go nuts with like 108 megapixel. You know what I'm saying? But, that doesn't look good on paper. So,
well, making a phone look good on paper does not really help make a phone look good in real life. Because, I mean, you mentioned the ultra-wide and the zoom and the telephoto lenses on here being basically potatoes. And that's just kind of how they are on everything that isn't like the Galaxy S23 or the Pixel 7 Pro. I mean, even the Pixel 7. The Pixel 7's ultra-wide is trash. The Pixel 7 Pro got a slight upgrade to it, but even then, it's just such an inferior sensor compared to the main one that it just, you zoom out to ultra wide and you're like, yeah, but this picture just doesn't look anything like what my normal sensor did, and it just looks duller and it looks less nice. Like when I'm on a Pixel 7, or if I'm on any Pixel. Since I always get the small ones, I don't get the pros, even though I would really love those, like, macro sensors. Since I already have a regular, like, Pixel 7, Pixel 6, all of those, and I have the baby S23, I hardly ever come out of the main sensor, outside of the 3x zoom on the Galaxy S23, which even then, the 3x zoom just doesn't leave a whole lot to be desired when you compare it to the main sensor. So I'm
for sure.
I really almost wish phones like this would just be like, okay, we're going to put all of our money into the main sensor rather than just giving you a crap ultra wide to say it has an ultra wide.
Yeah. That's the one drawback.
Like, because you're discounting the user. Yeah.
100%. But honestly, when you see what they're doing in that main sensor, I'm not too upset about it. Like, I agree, it'd be more balanced if there was like, say, a 50 megapixel sensor for the main and then like a nicer, like maybe a 50 megapixel for the ultra wide, right?
Even if you're not going to do like a super good like telephoto lens, if you're going to have a sensor that big, just let us crop in further from the main sensor for like 5x, 10x, 30x. You can bin, you can just like crop down and then pixel bin.
Well, so with 200 megapixels, the maximum you can crop down that native pixel is 4x, right?
Yeah.
And 108 megapixel, the maximum you crop down because it's 9:1 pixel binning is 3x, right? So let's put that in perspective. That's also why if you look at the good old Lumia 1020 back in the day at like 41 megapixels, it only let you do, I think it was 3x native, like lossless zoom, right?
Yeah.
So that's, if as soon as you go over 4x, on a 200 megapixel, you're doing some sort of interpolation. That doesn't mean it's bad. I think there's a lot of 50 megapixels that can do 5x just fine. For example, Pixel 7, right? You can punch into 5x with the super res zoom. You're going to get a good experience. And, it's not just Google that's doing super res zoom now. They call it something else, but a lot of the Chinese makers are doing some sort of like image stacking using the OIS and or the fact that your hands are moving a little bit to kind of get sub-pixel interpolation. This is totally an ISP technique at this point. Whether they implement it or not, that's the question, right? And then sometimes they save on money on just the software by not implementing it, because I think some of these algorithms are licensed by other companies, so they have to pay for them. But if you look at the rest of this phone series, I've got like GSM Arena open right now, and I'm comparing the Pro Plus to the Pro to the Turbo. And display-wise, they all have a beautiful 120 hertz, OLED 1080p panel at 6.67 inches. Now, the Turbo has an extra bright display, which is where it is a little different, and more color palette as well, 68 billions versus 1 billion, which is like, what? Really? Do you need that much? I don't know. But you look at the rest of it, they're all very similar, but the main cameras are different. The Pro Plus has the 200 megapixel, the Pro has a 50, and the Turbo has a 64. And they all have OIS, which is interesting. And then, of course, they all have stereo speakers. They all have fingerprint sensors built into the power lock key. That way it saves a bit of money. It's not under display.
I love it when they do those. I mean,
yeah,
I understand why people love having it just like on the screen, because you're obviously, if you're picking up a phone, you're going to touch it with your finger. You might as well use that to unlock. But
right.
Unless it's an ultrasonic sensor like Samsung's, like I hate optical sensors for fingerprint scanners just because they're just going to light up your hand like ET. And as a night owl, like I don't need that at 3 a.m.
Right.
when I have completely overshot my bedtime by binging 100 chapters of some trashy romance fantasy manhwa from Korea. I mean,
I getcha.
If you could put it in the power button, then A, it's easier to replace because it's a component that is already made to be easy to detach from the phone because it's a button. And also it just means that case makers like cannot completely, utterly just like entomb your phone in
I love that word. That's a good
in
one.
Different plastics, because it's like, oh, you need to be able to touch the fingerprint sensor. So you have to be able to physically touch your power button. So you don't have to deal with any of the like clickiness or gooiness that some people complain about when when we're talking about covered buttons and cases.
100%. All three of them have headphone jacks, which I think is cool. 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 67 watt charging. And here's the other thing. The Pro Plus has 120 watt wide charging, which, to be fair, the Note 11 Pro Plus last year also had. So, Xiaomi's been pushing 120 watt on their high-end mid-range phones, I guess. This is a mid-range. I don't know where to place this. $400 is actually slightly cheaper than mid-range, but spec-wise, this is definitely a mid-range phone. Anyway, like no wireless charging here, obviously, because China doesn't do this unless they go really high-end. But I mean, you can't go wrong with a 120 watt, 5,000 milliamp hour charging. Like,
well, I mean, if you're just recharging this phone, is going to take like what, 45 minutes from 0 to 100? Not even.
120 watt, it's going to take you like about 20 minutes.
Ugh.
Right? 67 watt will take you about 40 minutes.
Yeah, see, after years of just using like Google and Samsung phones, and again, using the small ones, so not even getting that ridiculous 45 watt charging that is so freaking hard to hit unless your phone is flat out dead.
Right.
Yeah, no. I want to be able to just plug my phone in for 5 minutes and just get like 30% back, so that way I can just like, oh, I'm gonna head to the park, I'm gonna like have a quick snack or go like use the restroom, and then I'm gonna grab my phone and go, and I can just plug my phone in for a few minutes and just get back up to what I need in order to survive 4 hours in a theme park with taking photos of fireworks.
So if you have 130% in 5 minutes, you need 120 watt at least.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, that's what extended power range is for, man. We're finally getting from 100 to 240. Just as soon as some phones in the West will freaking support it.
Yeah, so I have the Realme GT3 here, the 240 watt charger, and it's 9 minutes to 100, and it is unbelievable. You plug it in for 80 seconds and you get something like 20%, 25 or something. Like,
yeah, see, I don't understand how that hasn't migrated here. Like, we have been so held back.
Because Americans are kind of boring and have habits. And their habit is to plug their phone in at night, which is why we have optimized charging on the Pixel, right? Because you don't need to charge at even maximum like PD charging. You need to hold back and, get that 100% when your alarm goes off, basically, right? And I think that's a fair good thing. But you look at other countries, you look at India, for example, people do not charge overnight. They charge opportunistically. They don't always have power at their house because power outages are common. They might be out and about and they might need to plug in for a little bit. And that's why in markets like that, higher speed charging really makes a lot of sense. You carry that big brick around, but at least you get, an opportunity to charge for 10 minutes. You get 20, 30%, right? And you're good to go for like the rest of the day or whatever. And on top of that, that charger, most of these charging bricks, like the one for the 240-watt charger, are PD compliant. So they will charge your laptop. They will charge another phone that doesn't necessarily use that technology. So they're starting to make these bricks kind of universal. And, you get them included.
Well, I mean, that was the dream of power delivery in USB-C, wasn't it? One charger, one cable. It's just such an inbox zero kind of a thing that I know we're never going to get to, but I dream of it anyway.
I think we're mostly there, honestly. I mean, I look at my world right now and I don't, even those fast phones that support faster speeds, that have proprietary chargers for faster speeds, I actually use PD to charge them and I get 30 watt. They pretty much all support 30 watt. Okay. Even the ones that are like normally with their own supply charger do 120 or 240 or whatever, or 67. They all do 30 watt PD. So a 30 watt's okay, right? Like that and my microphones and my headphones.
30 watt I wish I got, because I don't get that on the Galaxy. The Galaxy S23 is 25 watts. This Pixel 7 is, I think, basically 22.
Yeah, but that's my point. This is a US problem. This is not a rest of the world problem, right? And that is why for these products, they have to have these kind of charging speeds because that's what people expect. And then, of course, as you said, there's the colors. Those colors are super cool, right? I love that the Chinese phones always go crazy on the colors. That just makes me happy.
They do. And the patterns. I mean, the Note 12 Turbo has that white. It looks like almost like a mother of pearl or something with or opal with like the depth to it. Yeah. Such a shame that we only get that for the white. But at the same time, then that Redmi also has the limited editions of that phone, and I am just sitting over here just green with envy. No, actually, no. I'm sitting over here blue with envy because I would be a Ravenclaw.
Yeah. So that's another thing that I love, is that they're doing these limited editions, right? And like usually that's Realme who does these, but Redmi is doing it as well, and it's just really cool. Like there's this Harry Potter edition of the Redmi Note 12 Turbo. That's the one we're discussing right now. But obviously, last time I did a Realme, it was the Coca-Cola phone, but there's been like, phones that are like manga themed and, like I have had a whole bunch over the years. It's pretty amazing. If you look at my unboxing videos, you'll see them. But, they all themed too. They come with wallpapers and icon packs and the whole shebang. Even the
ringtones and everything. And I'm just sitting over here just like, I got into Android around theming. Like, whenever I see these limited edition, like, totally themed out phones, I'm just like, this was my dream when I didn't even know what Android was. I just knew that this was a phone that wasn't an iPhone but could still run apps.
Yeah, I mean, the SIM removal tools are themed, and the chargers sometimes are themed, and it's just pretty cool. And I kind of dig it, because, like, how often do you see that anywhere else? So, yeah, the Redmi Note 12 series is out, and, it's looking pretty delicious in terms of specs for the money. And what I really like here is, as you said, there's that extra special turbo edition that unfortunately is China only for now. But, you never know. The thing about these phones is a lot of the China only editions eventually come out as global models like 2 or 3 months later. Because, in fact, the rest of the Note 12 series, the Pro and Pro Plus and regular, came out, I think, in January in China. So we're getting the global models now, which is why I'm focusing on, because these are going to show up very soon on Amazon and on other sites, that you can legitimately buy them at. And they support 5G in North America, limited bands, but you will still see some 5G, especially if you're using T-Mobile or a related carrier like Mint Mobile, our sponsor. So yeah, see what I did there? Yeah, I think that, this is a good deal. You're getting a pretty decent experience. You're getting a pretty solid phone. I didn't talk about the processors, but this is pretty mid-range. There's a Dimensity 1080 from MediaTek on the Pro Plus and the Pro. And then this turbo one that's only China right now is a Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2, so a little higher end. The 7 Plus Gen 2, by the way, is a brand new chip from Qualcomm, so that's an interesting one. And yeah, the RAM and storage are pretty generous on these as well. There's no memory card though, which is interesting because a lot of these used to.
If you have a 1 terabyte internal storage, at that point the micro SD slot is just something that can just like break. Like, why would you even bother? Because at that point, the only thing the micro SD can do is corrupt and screw up your apps.
Exactly. But I'm just pointing out that traditionally, at this price point, especially with the Redmi Note series, we used to get micro SD in the same way they still have headphone jacks. It's interesting though that they're moving away. I'm pro that because I believe it's not. I'm not really concerned so much about the corruption because of crappy cards, right? Because I'll use a good card. I'm more concerned about the contacts corroding inside the phone to the point where you're getting corruption on a good SD card. So, like, I hate to say this, but people don't understand that by adding a connector and creating a cavity in the phone, you're taking away space from the phone, you're taking structural integrity away from the phone, and you're adding a point of a failure. You're adding corrosion potential with connectors. So on one hand, I really understand that people love their SD upgrade and storage capabilities on phones. But at the same time, I think that ship has sailed. Okay. Same with, the batteries that are removable. That ship's never coming back because structural batteries are a thing. The reason your phone can't bend easily is not just because of the frame and the motherboard and the subframe underneath. If it's not a metal frame on the outside, it's usually a subframe inside that's metal and a plastic surround. It's because the battery is part of it. Like, that's why they're glued in, guys. It keeps the phone really rigid. And you start seeing that with electric cars as well. EVs are starting to ship now with structural packs basically it's part of the structure of the car. It makes it less repairable, but it saves on weight and it's just a better technology overall. So now we're getting headphone jacks on these. That seems to still be happening. I'm actually not sure that headphone jacks are completely going to disappear in these markets, like places like India in particular.
I don't think they will. I mean, here's the thing. If you add in the micro SD contacts and you have the chance of that, like, corroding contacts and whatever inside of your phone, worst comes to worst, it just means you can't put a micro SD card in it, or maybe it could do something to the connector and end up, like, mucking about with your actual internal storage. For the 3.5 millimeter jack, literally all it can do is audio input output. So there's no real...
Yeah, it's an analog signal, so you can also clean it with...
Yeah, there's not as much risk to the device. It's a standard that is still very widely used, and it's a cheap part. The only issue is the amount of space it'll take up inside of a phone. And the fact that most phones don't. The 3.5 millimeter jack isn't the issue. It's the fact that none of these phones are putting in a DAC worth a damn in any of these.
Yeah, that's true. Although that's changing. Sometimes you're surprised by these. I've noticed that some of these phones will have decent DACs sometimes, and you're like, oh, wait, really? Like, you listen to them, and you're like, oh, that was a pleasant surprise. Was not expecting that. So, I wouldn't always say that's true, but, in most cases it is true. The other thing, is they have glass fronts and back on these particular phones, but sometimes a plastic back that looks like glass. But they went the extra step here, according to the specs. I don't think there's a metal frame on these, so it's, outside frame. So there is probably a bit more plasticky feeling on the outside, but you're going to put it in a case anyway, right?
Yeah.
You're going to put it in a case, who cares? The other thing to keep in mind is all of these Chinese, and I say Chinese here in the sense that they were made in China by a Chinese company, not sold only in China, because these are global phones, except for the turbo, come with, in the box, a TPU translucent flexible case. So you get protection and you get to still show off the beautiful color.
Well, and even the special edition one in here has this really weird looking case, because it's like the back of the phone, half of the back is completely just like open top to bottom, and then the other side is fully like plastic. And I'm just like, okay, were you trying to figure out if you wanted a bumper or a case and just couldn't figure it out, so you split the difference? But
I don't know.
I love any kind of creativity or just like going outside the box we can get with cases. I published like a 4,000 word diatribe essentially on how to buy a proper case and not just like buy cheap crap off of Amazon. So cases are love. Cases are life for me.
Cases are definitely an Ara thing. You should read her stories on Android Police, okay, guys? But here's the thing I was trying to say is that the cases that come with these are not crap. Like, they are made by the manufacturer. They're perfectly fitted. They will get yellow over time, unfortunately, a little bit because they are made of TPU. But depends on the manufacturer as to how quickly they yellow.
Well, it also just depends how often you go outside. I mean, the yellowing is just a factor of how long you're in contact with sunlight.
Yeah. Also, I think environmental factors, if you touch with a lot of kind of like different oils, kind of tend to stain these cases as well, right? So if you eat a lot of curry, for example, you'll get curry stains on your phone case.
Well, it doesn't even matter if you're eating anything. I have a Pixel 5a case in the other room that it was that nice like lime green one that they put out. And I wore that for like 3 months with this like neon yellow pop socket. And after a couple of months, somebody was like, was that intentional? And I look at the back of my phone and it's just like the live long and prosper symbol in brown, just from the oils in my hands from holding this phone for 6 to 8 hours a day for 2 months.
Absolutely. One last thing I just noticed that we didn't mention in the camera section, that the f-stop on that 200 megapixel camera doesn't suck either. It's f over 1.7. So, they clearly care about the camera on this phone. And I think that based on my experience with other Xiaomi phones, like the Xiaomi 13 Pro, which is one of the best camera phones with a 1-inch sensor that I'm using right now, their image pipeline is pretty solid. Even the one that's not Leica branded. I've used Xiaomi phones extensively over the last few years. And one of the reasons I gotten excited about the Redmi Note series over all these years. And if you look at some of my previous reviews on Geekspin, you can see reviews of the previous models, is that the camera experience is actually not sucky. So to me, this is a milestone every year when the Redmi Note series comes out, because we are getting kind of like the best bang for your buck. It's like when Realme comes out with their numbered series, the Realme 10 being the latest. You have 10, 10 Pro, 10 Pro Plus, and those phones are also really amazing for the price. It's really nice to see that happening. Poco is another player. It's also owned by Xiaomi, and they make variations on these. Like, you're going to probably see a Poco version in some markets that are identical to these Redmi Notes. And, it's funny you mentioned that, Ara, earlier about the Note branding on this. They started out being called Notes because back in the day when the Note series started, they were larger phones. But now it doesn't matter anymore.
They're just normal sized phones. That's the problem.
That's correct. And they've never had a stylus. These have never had a stylus. It's never been about the stylus. It's always been about the size. But it's interesting how they kept their names, basically, despite that meaning nothing.
Names are interchangeable, and at the same time, it's also one of those things that people will look for specific names regardless of what the phone actually has. Exactly. Which is unfortunate, because, when you see Note, you think it's a big phone, and no, it's just like the standard for phone sizes these days is just like 6.5 to 6.9, and I'm just sitting over here going, where did my 5.8-inch pixels go?
Yeah, that's...
like my 4.7-inch Moto X, I miss phones that fit in my freaking pockets. Like, I wear a shoulder holster whenever I leave the house because...
I know, that's what I love. Like, it's like me, I wear cargo pants because I've got big pockets for my big phones.
Well, and even last year I had the S22 Ultra for a couple of months. I had to be careful which case I put on that phone because most of them with a proper case, most of the proper cases would not fit in my holster.
Yeah, no.
It was just too big.
I bet. I do dig your holster approach, though. It's pretty cool. So let's switch gears to the next thing. I think the Note is great, and I'm glad we are covering it. I've got the 2 here, so I'll let you know more maybe on the next show once I play with them a little bit. OnePlus 11 Jupiter Rock Edition. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. It's just a special edition of the OnePlus 11. It's China only right now, but I was excited because it looks super cool. It's kind of like a marble countertop built into your OnePlus 11 that looks like Jupiter's cloudy colored beautifulness or something. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the gas storms on Jupiter and some of the variations between the different, I don't want to say stratums, because these are more like over the course of the planet, so like magnetic rings almost. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the cooler ones I've seen since that, Thunder Purple back from like which one was that? Was that the OnePlus?
No, I want to say 6T. You're 100% right.
Yeah, I still miss that phone a little bit.
Yeah, I miss when they made the colors. See, like this, I'm almost tempted to ping Spencer and go, hey, send me this thing, just because it's just so cool. I don't like, I'm not in love with it, but I think it's cool. And the price is, of course, in China, very reasonable at $710 US with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. This is a high end model, obviously, but there's nothing different about this phone other than the physical back panel and the goldish camera
Can I
pod.
just say they missed a huge opportunity? Like, they just include a generic clear TPU case with this phone. Like
Mhm.
the case needs to be like designed like an astronaut or something, or like NASA or whatever the space program in China is. Like you just gave us a
No, the
clear.
Discovery from 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's what needs to be hovering right next to it.
Yeah. Or Star
Right?
Trek. Like, give me a Starfleet insignia case right over this.
Yeah, but that would require licensing, and they don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
it
This is China.
would.
Remote. They don't care about IP over there. I guess they probably wouldn't bother licensing it and just do it. But okay, and it exists. I just thought I'd mention it. I'll link to it. If you are wanting to rock the most unique OnePlus 11 and show your friends, this is it. And just be aware, though, it does not ship with Oxygen OS. It ships with Color OS, which obviously is pretty much the same thing. But it's slightly enough different that also this is a Chinese version of Color OS. So if you import this phone, not only will you get less 5G band support because it's probably slightly different RF front end, you won't be able to change the launcher. Just be aware of that. Like, you'll be able to install any launcher you want, but you won't be able to select it. And you won't probably be
Then
able
what good is it?
then you won't be able to change the messaging app, in the sense that you will be able to install any other messaging app for texting. And then you'll be able to even select whatever messaging app you want for texting. And every time you reboot the phone, it'll default back to the default app. That's a Chinese thing.
I
That's
know.
how they control the people,
I
because they
know.
don't want you to change your launcher, because, there's some probably some surveillance software in there or something. Who knows? Anyway,
Just wants to know how many times you opened an app in a day, which regular launchers can snoop on too.
of course.
Well, heck, you don't even need the launcher for that. That's something the system can tell. Like, the Android system can tell you how many times you launched an app in a day.
No, but they want to secretly find out and tell somebody in back end somewhere, and it's not like, anyway. I just want you to be aware, if you get this phone, it's ColorOS 13, and it's going to be that flavor of ColorOS that's only China. So you'll still get your Google support, but you'll have to jump through a few hoops. Also, speaking of phones that will never get here, that really I wouldn't even recommend, but I love because they're so cool in terms of technology, Huawei launched a couple of phones towards the end of last week, just after I did the podcast last week. And those are the P60 series, which is their photography-centric phone, and the Mate X3, which is their folding phone, the one that folds internally, not externally, because they have different. Huawei actually has two ranges of book-style folding: internal folding and external fold. Anyway, the P60 series, though, I will try to get a review unit. I got the P50 last year. Again, no GMS on this, so don't expect to be having a good experience here in the West. So that's why I don't recommend them. But if you look at what they've done with the camera systems, this is, Huawei's definitely still got it, right?
It's so pretty. Like,
Yeah, I know.
the P60 art is just so pretty with that blue and with the tapering of the camera module. Just like, give it to me. That's all I need. Just give me a pretty phone and software that will not get in my freaking way. Problem being, it's just, since it's Huawei, you can't get the software you need on it.
So those of you watching on Patreon right now, you know that you can get a video version of the podcast on Patreon. If you want to find out more, listen to the end of the show. But for those of you watching right now, Ara is showing us all the cool photos of these phones. Look, and let's just jump to the camera because that's what I'm excited about. This has the same variable aperture sensor as the Mate 50 Pro last year. The one that I wasn't able to get somehow, but I hope I can do this one. So this is completely variable, Ara. It's not like the Samsungs that used to switch between two apertures. This has a continuous 1.4 to 4.0. This blows my mind. I don't know how they're able to do this. And this has an RYYB sensor, 48 megapixel with OIS as the main sensor. With an RYYB sensor, which is already extremely light sensitive, and an f/1.4 lens, I think you're going to get some unbelievable low light performance out of this.
I just want to take it to the park and photograph like fireworks, and then just go traipsing around Fantasyland afterward. Because this just looks like it's made for theme park photography. Especially since if it works well in low light environments, I'm willing to bet this would be awesome for like filming or taking photos inside of the rides.
What's striking me here, Ara, is that if I look at it, I bet you with that RYYB sensor that's super light sensitive, and even at f over 4.0, you're going to get some really good low light performance, which means you can capture things with a wider depth of field, right? So sometimes you want to do that. I love the shallow field effect, it's nice, but sometimes you want to capture the person in front and the fireworks behind. And you might be able to do that here because that sensor is so light sensitive. So that's actually pretty cool, you know? And the ultra wide is kind of boring, 13 megapixels. They could have done better than that. But they do sensor fusion, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the art version, there's a P60 art, which is like, I think the higher end one. It's like the equivalent of the Pro Plus used to be. And that one has a 40 megapixel ultra wide. So telephotos, we get 12 megapixel with OIS for the base model, and we get a 48 megapixel with OIS for the fancier model. These are optical 3.5 inch. So they're folded lenses with large 48 megapixel sensors, similar to the Pixel, 7 Pro or 6 Pro, that have a folded lens for a relatively small magnification. Most of the time, folded lens they're using for 5x and higher, but in this case, because there's such a large sensor behind there, they're having to use a folded lens for 3.5, which supposedly using sensor fusion can do up to 100. Yeah, that's probably about as good as the Galaxy S23 Ultra, to be honest with you. So the telephoto lens, though, has a f over 2.1 aperture, which is insane for a folded lens. I don't know how they did that. Wow. I mean, most folded lenses are in a f over 3 and higher, right? This is kind of amazing. So this is using a Snapdragon 8 Plus 4G chipset. So this is basically an 8 Plus Gen 1, but with the 5G deleted or 5G disabled, because Huawei is not able to use their Kirin chips anymore because they can't make them. And they're not allowed to use 5G chips from import from anyone.
They're not allowed to use 5G from anybody worth using.
It's that crazy ban again, So yeah. So they're funny because you used to have the Pro Plus, and now they have the Art, which is kind of like the fancy pants version. These are like flagships, guys. They have 6.67 LPTO OLED with 120 hertz and variable, of course. Very odd resolution of 1220 by 2700, which is not that odd because they've been doing that resolution for a few years now. And Honor does that resolution too, because Honor spawned off of Huawei and they're still using a lot of Huawei engineering. So they inherited, I think, the same suppliers and they're using the same displays. I had a conversation with them about that at IFA, actually. And they did say that, yes, they're using the same supplier still, which is why there's a lot of similarities. Interesting. What else? Batteries. Just looking at the spec sheet here. So 4,800 milliamp hours, 66 and 88 watt charging on this regular and the Pro.
And 50 watt wireless would be
with
nice.
With a proprietary charger. The Art, though, packs a 5,100 milliamp hour battery, which is a new silicon carbon, something they use in EVs. So that one seems to be a little higher capacity for the same volume, which is exactly what you get. And of course, prices are in China, remember, at least $100 US. If they ever come globally, looking at $657 for the regular. At the lowest tier, you're looking for $1,000 for the Pro and $1,300 for the Art. And frankly, I'm not surprised because these have always been extremely high-end phones, right? I like that green and that purple.
I was going to say that lavender is so pretty. Yeah. But it still doesn't beat the blue of the Art.
No, I agree. But that white pearlescent, what a weird marble looking one, is interesting too.
Yeah, no, that's giving me opal and mother of pearl vibes, and I'm digging it. Can we make that a thing for 2024 phones? That and I want to see like proper like cobalt blue phones come back.
Can we get colorful phones? I mean, I have to say the bespoke colors on the S23 Ultra, I'm digging this year for the US. I have to say, for once, we're getting some cool, like that green. Yeah, I dig it.
I found that green so ugly.
Really?
I don't know. Well, maybe it's just that I'm a chronic allergy sufferer, but I looked at that green and I went, that looks like something I threw out in a tissue a couple of days ago. Because, I mean, I was kind of like that on the Pixel 7 colors, too. That I hated the, like, lemongrass for the Pixel 7.
Right.
Green is just one of those things that it can look so good or it can look so bad. And Samsung just completely runs the gamut on them. Because they had those, like, god-awful olive, like, Galaxy Buds 2 and the Galaxy S21 FE had that olive, and I was just like, this just looks like this looks like the bastard child of an army, of a 1960s army uniform and baby food.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to like green, so I'm happy that they have this green, but I don't know. I want more color in general. Like, I'm sick and tired of black.
Well, I want that sky blue and that red to stop being exclusive colors and come to the main phones one of these years. Like, a red phone and a blue phone, those are the ones that we want. Those are nice classic colors. They're both expertly done. I just need them to be available on something other than an unlocked phone.
Exactly. So these should be coming out globally. Huawei's indicated that. So we should be getting these in Europe at some point, which is, if you can live without GMS, this might be a thing. If you love cameras. Notice also that I believe there's no Leica branding anymore because that partnership has ended. But I can guarantee you, knowing Huawei's imaging expertise, that you won't miss it. It's going to be pretty damn great. The P50 Pro last year was quite amazing in terms of imaging. So then the Foldy one, well, it's very thin. I guess that's about all I've got to say here. I really should be talking to Michael Fisher about this. He would be able to tell me like, oh yeah, this is the thing about this phone you should know about, because, for me, it's just like, okay, it's a Foldy phone.
It's giving me those Nokia 1020 vibes again with that back camera
I do love that pod. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Because it also, with the like bars on the top and the bottom of the circle, I'm like, this is some weird mixture of like HAL and or no, maybe not HAL. What's the other one? Kit, maybe? And then the Nokia 1020, because it's
right.
Okay, I'm not a fan of like a huge, ginormous camera module, but if you're gonna give me full, huge camera sensors, I'm okay with having a big camera module that is properly made and properly protected, instead of having them all in either this thin little bar that is the first thing that comes in contact with a surface whenever you set your phone down, or individual little cameras, which mean that every one of them will hit separately and each one of them will break.
Right.
So I prefer this over what Samsung and Google have been doing for the last year.
So similar to the Xiaomi Mi Fold, this is super thin at 5.3 millimeters. And on top of that, it's 11.8 millimeters folded. So yeah, it's pretty thin. Even when you have it closed, it's going to feel like a slightly thicker normal phone. 120 hertz, both front and back, or front and inner display. And cameras are, 50 megapixel main with OIS, 8 megapixel periscope telephoto, 5x optical, and a 13 megapixel ultra wide. So it's not too bad. But I mean, for me, there are enough Chinese imports you can get that are supporting GMS fully now that are sold in Europe in terms of folding, not flip form factor, that I probably would skip this simply because you have to deal with the whole GMS debacle and lack thereof, I should say. And also 1,840 euros. It's like 2,000 US dollars. It's a lot of money. I mean, wow. That's eye-watering.
Yeah, I know. Especially when right now that phone prices are mostly higher than ever, and trade-in values have been just absolutely plummeting across the board.
Yeah.
Like this is the bad time to be selling phones at anything over $1,000.
For sure. So anyway, we've got a couple of new Huawei phones to play with. If you're into that, I'm definitely into that P60 Art because, photography and cameras. But the rest, I could do without. Let's see. Vivo X Fold 2 is rumored to be coming. This is a we know it's coming soon, but we don't know too much about it. This is the follow-up on Vivo's X Fold from last year, obviously. And that was a pretty decent phone for a lot of journalists that I know had it play. I didn't play with it, but it's gonna have an 8 Gen 2 this time around, obviously. And yeah, I mean, we don't know too much about it. Last year's was a pretty decent phone all around. It had a good set of features. So, this is also going to come to the West at some point, like the original Vivo. So consider that. If you're looking for a phone, if you're in Europe, that's a foldy phone, and you're like, I should buy soon, maybe wait for that Vivo. So we have a little bit more info, and you have a bit more choices to grab, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that one in particular? Do you like that red color? I think that's pretty dope.
Well, is that red color actually that phone? Because with the caption underneath it, that makes it sound like it's one of the older ones.
Oh, you're right. That's the last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't know what it's going to look like.
Although I will go ahead and say that red needed a little bit more like metallic flake to it. It didn't have the depth. It didn't have the shine.
I do like that the hinge is a matte black or something. That's cool, though.
Yeah, no, the hinge needs to be something that will not show too many smudges and will just kind of fade into the shadows when you start unfolding it.
Yeah. No, but I mean, look, this is exciting. We're getting more folding phones for those of you who want them. And hopefully some of these are coming to Europe, at least, and some of the other countries outside of China. Like we desperately need a flip competitor in the US. Maybe that rumored Razr that's coming that has the full front cover display with the camera punched through it will deliver that. No, you don't think so, huh?
I was not part of the initial Razr craze. At this point, I do not know what literally it would have to be some kind of monkey's paw wish, or you got just the most vengeful genie in history in order to turn around the Razr and make it the clamshell foldable flip phone that will actually sell in 2023, 2024. We've spent so long waiting for another Razr, and the last time we did that, we did not get anything close to what we were anything close to what we needed in order to have any sort of confidence going forward.
It's true, but here's the thing, right? I'm keeping a positive outlook here simply because I'm wanting Moto to have learned from its previous mistakes and from the Flip, the Z Flip, the Samsung one, and from the Oppo Find N2 Flip, which I have, and is, other than the lack of OIS and wireless charging, a better phone, in my opinion, than the Z Flip 4. So I think that, it's possible that they can be competitive. Let's see if they can. Let's say that they will. And that way, because we know this Razr's coming to US and Canada. So, having some competition. Europe now has the Oppo Flip, and I want to see more, because there's a lot of folds you can buy and import that have GMS and stuff. Xiaomi, BBK Group with Oppo and Vivo have them, and of course Huawei, which without GMS you don't really want to deal with. But
at least it shows us what hardware is possible.
We have a lot of choices on folding ones, but very, very few choices on flippy ones. You know what I'm saying? And I prefer the flip factor myself. I want more flippy. That's why I'm going to try to stay positive about Moto. I know Moto often messes stuff up, but let's just hope that this time they've seen what Samsung's done, they've seen what Oppo's done, and they did their homework. And from the looks of it, having a big cover display, that's the one thing that Moto did well in the previous Razrs. When I talked to Michael, who's the expert at this, he's like, yeah, I eventually had to put it down because it just wasn't good enough anymore. But that was the one thing that I miss on my Z Flip 4, right? He's like, it was just the real estate on that screen is just missing.
Because the cover screen on the Flip 4 was one of those things that I thought I would love it and I thought I would use it all the time. And it's just too small to do anything with. You can't even read full notifications on it worth a damn.
Yeah, and on the Oppo Flip, they have enough real estate for you to expand notifications, but the software doesn't do it. This is just a software update away from showing you a little more on that. It's really large, that screen. Do you know that at 3.4 whatever inches, the Oppo Find N2 Flip screen is bigger in size than the original, G1 T-Mobile Android phone. So you could theoretically have a keyboard on there and use it. Amazing, right? Yeah, I know.
Rest in peace, G1.
Rest in peace, G1. More folding rumors. We've seen some prototypes of this from both TCL and Samsung before and others, but there is now a rumor that Samsung might be actually launching a trifold phone in the next year or two. And I wouldn't put it past them because, where do you go next, right? Like you go even more crazy. So there's some rumors floating around about that. And how do you feel about that?
This is gonna sound sacrilegious. I only have so much RAM in my head, so when it comes to like, especially like fold, flip, any experimental like concepts and rumors around those, I just kind of have to go, these are some very nice dreams. I can't wait to see when one of them will actually come true.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Honestly, this is more
especially when foldables, we're starting to get more adoption, we're starting to get more market share with them, but it's still in such an infancy here in North America compared to everywhere else because we've basically we've had Samsung and then we've had a couple of Moto Razrs that just left us wanting way too much more.
100%. But I thought it'd be a great segue because we were talking about folding phones and I was like, next topic is the Galaxy S23 camera updates. And I was like, oh, look, a Samsung trifold. Like we can spend like 30 seconds to segue. And it worked because, here we are.
I will say for trifolds, I'd love to be as hopeful about them, but considering how much problem one hinges, having to deal with two doesn't strike me as something that's going to come off well for the and the amount of time it will take them to do it that properly will probably be the time between us getting folding phones and us reaching the point where we have like life model decoy hologram phones of some kind.
Right. So Samsung Galaxy S23 camera update rolling out in Korea. We don't have it yet. It's coming to the West. If you haven't unlocked Galaxy S23 of any kind, this should be rolling out first on the unlocked, hopefully very soon thereafter on the carrier versions. This is what we've been waiting for, at least hopefully. There's been some rumors for a while now of some camera improvements. And apparently they're going to fix the lag. So that's a big one. Will they fix the crazy HDR? I don't know.
I mean, HDR and Samsung have always kind of been like frenemies, it feels like.
True.
But I mean, I'm also one of those people who Samsung's taste when it comes to like the computational photography and like figuring out what makes a better picture. Like I always just feel like it's a little too oversaturated. So Samsung looks great during the day, but the moment you take it inside or the moment you take it out at night, it just falls so far beneath everything else that I use.
Yeah, pixel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. But like there's other improvements here that are possibly noteworthy. Better autofocus, which is already pretty decent. That we're going to get improvement in low light video.
I'll believe that when I see it. What I want to see it when it comes to like low light, because Samsung at night tends to like overexpose everything. Like I am so used to if I tap I'm going to pull up my camera, I'm going to take like a picture of the castle or the picture of the big ball at Epcot. I'll tap it and then I have to go to that little brightness slider underneath and I will try and slide it all the way down. And more than half the time when I do that, instead of it moving it all the way down, it flips from the main camera to the selfie.
Oh,
because that's the exact same gesture.
I know, it's such a pain. There's some user interface issues around that for sure.
Well, and you have to, unlike Pixel, where you can like drag down the shadow and drag up the brightness as you desire. Like if you do that, it'll stay that way for as long as the camera app is open or until you hit the reset button. For Samsung, every time you change autofocus, you have to pull that back down.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it simply because I use the S23 Ultra a lot for my car photography, and any improvement, especially the latency, is welcome. This also comes with April 23 security update, so that's a nice little bonus. So yeah, I expect that to land. This is a much more universal piece of news for us here because we're actually talking about phones that some of you already use, including you, Ara. And myself for the car stuff. Moto Edge 40 series is leaked. This is only here because, well, I want to believe that one day Moto will make a competitive flagship inside the US. Because here's the thing. the Edge series outside the US, the Edge 30, previously Edge 20, especially the Pro models and the Ultra models they've made, have been awesome. And when Verizon gets their dirty hands on these and turns them into US models, they do things like remove the metal frame, put a plastic frame, remove the UIS, or change the main sensor, or do God knows what to these to make them worse. Remove wireless charging is another favorite of Verizon. Add stupid millimeter wave, another favorite of Verizon. Look, the point is, I have to give Moto kudos for making that magenta phone, the one that was Pantone branded, that smelled like roses. I got a review in it. It had a scent that went with the magenta color. It was ridiculous.
Did it come with a bottle of perfume, or was it just kind of like the new car smell and it just wore off over time?
No, it was just the whole box was scented. The whole box was scented.
Oh.
And so the phone was scented for a while after that. I believe I'll let you guys know. It's been a month since I put it in storage. If my entire drawer or just the phone itself smell like roses. But that phone was exactly what I want from Moto. Unlocked. It was a global model brought to the US, no compromise. Metal frame, all the settings, all the features. Now, it was a mid-range phone in terms of specs, but I loved that Verizon didn't just deface it, you know? And so here's what we're getting in Europe is basically what I'm putting out here on this link that I'm going to share from GSM Arena. If you're living abroad and you are looking forward to getting a Moto Edge 40 or 40 Pro, this is the spec sheet you get. So in that article. And what we're looking at is, basically similar to the X series from Moto, which is the Chinese flagships. So X40 versions of these phones. So 165 hertz OLED display. I don't know why that refresh rate. Who cares? I mean, even gamers probably don't need more than 120. I could be wrong, but correct me if you guys feel like you should have if you think you need 144 or 165 hertz display, let me know. I doubt it though.
I still can't entirely tell with 120, honestly.
Neither can I. One certainly can't tell 144.
This phone allegedly has 120, but since it's variable refresh, I'm just I'm not sure I've ever seen this actually go at 120 hertz unless I'm just flying through chapters of some webcomic trying to figure out what scene I was on.
Yeah, the other thing is people always tell me, well, like the manufacturers, they tell me, well, when people play games, they want the high refresh rate. Then you go check out which games support the high refresh rate. It's 3, okay, or whatever. I'm like, then why are you making phones with 144 and 165 hertz? I don't get it.
The refresh rate for the screen doesn't matter as much as the input rate. We anticipate stuff happening when we're in a mobile game. We will tap before we actually even see the move.
Correct.
And that matters more.
Yeah. So looking quickly at the specs here, so the Edge Pro has a 165, the Edge has a 144, their OLED display, a 1080p, lots of RAM and storage. You got Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. These are really nice phones.
I love these color names.
I know, aren't they great?
Angel Falls.
Yeah.
The Viva Magenta is there, so that should hopefully look good.
For those of you who don't believe that Moto can make phones that are water resistant, yes, it's just Verizon removes that. IP68 on these, okay? Wireless charging on these, okay? And, 68 watt charging on the Edge at 4,400 milliamp hour. And we've got an even bigger battery, 4,600. It was 125 watt charging on the Pro. See, this is what I'm talking about. You look at these specs and you're like, yeah, this is a real phone. This is the real deal, 50 megapixel main camera on the regular one. There's a Dimensity 820 on the non-Pro, and of course the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, I mentioned that. Both have the 50 megapixel ultra wide, and they're just not messing about. Why can't we get this here? Okay, that's all I'm saying. Verizon, don't mess this up, because you're going to. Anyway, look, I'm not a Moto fan. That. I like their phones, but they're not really my thing. Generally, don't think I'd own one. But here's the thing. If they gave us better phones that are sold by Verizon and the carriers, I think they'd have a better chance. That's basically all I'm saying.
Well, the problem isn't that they want to sell these phones. These are the phones that they want to give away to people who are too stupid to realize that, I can get a if I have any sort of like modern smartphone that I can trade in, I can get a free Galaxy S23 or I can get a free whatever. And they're like, oh, this phone is free with my contract. Okay, that'll be good enough.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the people who comment on my Moto videos on my YouTube or talk to me about the Moto phones on Twitter and stuff are like telling me, yeah, I got a good deal, so I bought 2 of these, one for me and my spouse, kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but there's still the Verizon gimped version. Sorry for using that word. I know it's not the best word to use, but it's just like, anyway. The final piece of news is just more a PSA for folks. A worldwide developer conference, Apple's developer conference, will be happening June 5th. Expect 2 weeks of Apple all the things and not a single piece of Android news that can make its way through for that time frame. So I'm warning you now. Since
another 2 weeks I can go on vacation. Awesome.
I know, right? Exactly. As you all know, we're more Android centric on this podcast, mostly because Apple ignores me. They didn't used to when I was at Engadget, but I was at Engadget, so of course they didn't used to. But I have not received a device from them in years, and I'm not about to spend money on phones since I get pretty much everything else sent to me from everyone else. So, Apple, if you're listening and want to send me a phone, please do. Otherwise, I'll buy probably an iPhone someday again. I've been saying this, Ara, I bought an iPhone 11. I like to have an iPhone around for testing, but I also use iPhones for video. All my YouTube videos are recorded on iPhone because I still believe that Apple makes best video recording today. But that being said, since I bought my iPhone 11, which I bought about 6 months in, so around the holidays, Christmas, I've been saying, oh yeah, I'll buy another iPhone in a year or two. And then we're going to get the 15 soon, and I still have an iPhone 11. So that tells you a lot about my interest in upgrading my iPhone. But I think it's about time that I traded in.
But it also tells you that how long-lasting those devices have been, that they've held out for this long.
I have no complaints. The only thing I don't like about my iPhone 11, frankly, is that it's not an OLED. And it's also, I bought stupidly the base model, so I run out of storage all the time.
Yeah, see, that Apple hasn't upgraded its default storage option enough in this day and age. Just kills me because it's like they've never ever had micro SD. That was never going to be a thing, and they're like, oh, you can use like wireless drives or cloud storage in order to augment. And I'm like, no, because at some point I'm going to be stuck on a plane and I'm not going to have enough room to download a video to watch.
Exactly. All I'm trying to say is that I was my mistake. I should have known better. But because I only record 1 or 2 YouTube videos at a time and then I delete them, it doesn't matter that much. But next time, I'll just make sure to get a little bit more space. And of course, whichever phone I buy next will have OLED probably, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. All right. Tell folks where they can find you on the internet and your various social media handles and all that good stuff.
Y'all can find me at Android Police. As for social media, handle on both Twitter and Mastodon is at Ara Wagco, ARAWAGCO.
Do you have an Instagram account? Do you use that?
I do. I have Insta. I need to start getting into using it again. It's one of those things of I'll post like once every couple of months, and then other than that, I just like scroll through a bunch of Insta artists and then DM with a friend.
What's your handle?
Same one. It's the ARA WAG WAGCO.
Awesome. Well, folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, that's TNKGRL on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm also on Mastodon, but I haven't really started using it. So you know that for the podcast, we generally do the comments on Twitter. So you ping me and Ara on Twitter if you'd like about this podcast. And you may or may not get responses, but from me, you definitely will. So Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures of cars and pretty pictures of travel, food, of course, all taken with phones. So if you want to follow me there, you can do that. Same handle as Twitter, at Tankgirl. Just if you forget, just drop the vowels. It's like Tankgirl, the comic book, but drop the vowels. And of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com or on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. And if you can rate or review the show, please consider doing that. If your app lets you, that would be awesome. YouTube channels. There's a couple, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. If you want to subscribe to them, you know how YouTube works. Like, tell your friends, click the little bell, comment, all that stuff. The first channel is mostly about phones and direct peripherals like the wearables and, personal audio and things like that. And then the second channel is more about like all the rest of it, like home automation and car tech and travel accessories and things like that. So check them out. And finally, there's a Patreon. If you want to watch me and Ara on video, being silly, please join the Patreon. And if you want to help me financially, join the Patreon. That's really what it's for. The video is a bonus. You get it a day before the audio version because you're paying a little extra for that. And I appreciate you for doing that. So consider the Patreon, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There's also a Discord server you can join and a bunch of other perks there that you can get through your Patreon. So check it out. And I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And of course, I want to thank you, Ara, for being my guest. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's still weird to come on to other people's podcasts, but it's fun when I get to.
Well, we'll definitely have you on at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.